Because it's really like behind the performances, and it's also, I think, these people that do this kind of comedy, you know, it's the passion for, you know, it's almost their mission is in with it.
Well, as Roseanne Barr says, she said, I have to do this. She said, I've tried not to. I've tried not to speak my mind, and I can't.
Right,
you know?
I got it.
And I think it's also really inspirational. I think it encourages people, I think, to be proud of speaking their mind. You know, we live in a world where passion is like criticized. You know that one of the most vile things that humankind is doing to each other right now is where if you and I are having a conversation in a bar or something that we're really into it, we're passionate about something, and you know, political or ideological or whatever, some asshole will always use it, that stock sitcom-y, poor off-the-rack excuse for personality of their own line of, oh, you tell us what you really feel.
Oh, I know,
and,
right.
You know,
but you know, and it's worse for women too. Sometimes it's like, calm down, Dana.
I know, right? And that's
curb your enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's really indicative, I think, of a really overriding thing, which is, you know, you're just not supposed to get excited or passionate about anything unless it's a very programmed, you know, sports and some stupid, you know, TMZ shit or something. So this is all about being proud of caring and speaking your mind and going against the grain.
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, going against the grain, I mean, is a you know, something I've always been sort of attracted to, and I like individual thinkers. And I think even free speech, you know, not free speech, but speaking your mind, speaking freely, you know, has really become, I think, culturally, the whole mood of an attitude about it has changed. You know, in the 60s, the 70s, you know, when George Carlin started to grow his hair and change from regular comedian, I mean, he really was sort of like a pioneer in the way that, you know, he did it, even though, and the world was changing, like, with him, and, you know, he was an early...
Well, he actually, his personal growth and his creative growth was a result of the changes in the world around him, where he just felt like, I can't just stand here in a suit and shine.
He was like the comedy litmus for what was going on, you know, in the world.
He's a great sort of metaphor for the world around him.
And, you know, but my point is that somehow we've, you know, grown or evolved into a culture way far away from that, almost like what was the 50s or the 60s before that, where like, you know, you always remain calm, you don't show any of your authentic emotion, you don't, and don't speak your mind. It's really, you know, not, it unsettles everybody.
Well, you know,
and in California, where we are too, it's really bad. In Los Angeles, it's like totally...
And you know what else is interesting? You know, lest people think that because this is a bunch of comedians, and some of whom I mentioned are famously left-wing, this doesn't go along party lines. They're all independent thinkers. And, you know, here in Los Angeles, in the hotbed of latte liberalism, you know, to go against that grain is almost suicide.
Right.
You know, and so the interesting thing about most of the people in this book is both sides are pissed off at them half the time.
Yeah, yeah,
because they don't play by party lines. They're independent thinkers, and they speak their mind, and they don't care about, you know, whatever party line they're supposed to be a part of.
And it's interesting because there are some people that just are so, you know, just wouldn't do because they're so afraid, and it unsettles them when other people aren't afraid.
Yeah,
and, you know,
well, you know, I mean, I was raised with this canard that I'm sure you were too, and many people were, of, you know, you never talk about politics or religion in mixed company, or something, you know, like some variation on that. I was like, what else do you want to talk about?
What do you
American Idol, really?
I'm too bored otherwise. You know, if you're just going to talk surface stuff and it just not be about anything, it's like a waste of time for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, but you know, a lot of times, even from my blog, people will say, you know, I really get your passion. And the thing is that I don't really like to be around people, you know, and I think that's an artistic thing. And it's when you start to make people not be able to talk, also you get less artist and you get less of, you know, colorful experiences.
And you know, some of that is cultural, and some of it's really indoctrinated. I mean, you know, one of the great ironies, this comes up actually on an episode of The Green Room, is that so much of the sort of, so much of the censorship or kind of silencing of things, of statements and ideas, really, ironically, comes from the left. You know, if you want to talk about race in a way that's challenging, or you want to talk
or
about...
real, or is it really real? I mean, no.
Pretty much, I mean, that's just the most obvious predictable
Or I mean,
example,
bias
but-
or prejudice. Yeah, they make
Yeah,
pretend they're
and
not, and then they are, totally.
Right.
Or, you know,
But just if you want to go
Practice-
down that
right.
that road, it's like, you know, people won't let you because you're not supposed to.
Right.
Well, you know, so who knows, you know, the infinite variety of discourse that's been squelched because people are self-conscious about it.
Right,
and
right.
uncomfortable about
Right.
it. And that's across the board with everything. You know, there are many people who were Obama supporters and all their friends were Obama supporters, and now they're sitting back and going, you know what, it doesn't matter who's in there, everybody's a everybody's a dick, everybody's sucking the same cock, and there's something else going on here.
Right.
But there are others who are like, no, you can't say that, you have to support him, we supported him,
Right,
he's our
right,
guy,
right,
blah, blah,
right,
blah.
right, right.
You know, and like Liz Winstead says, you know, I don't have a guy, I don't have a guy.
Right, right.
You know, I believe in truth.
And at that time, I'm sorry.
That's
about
my
that,
point. Is we don't really know
because no one's
because
on
everybody's
site.
afraid to
Remember
say
that
it, because
saying-
people take
right.
such offense, and then there's, you know, all sorts of cultural what do you call it, taboos around speaking your mind about certain things.
Right, and there's an
certain ways.
unconscious social contract between people that we don't
Well,
say it. But you know, you remember. I remember there used to be a slogan, you know, about AIDS. You know, and for AIDS awareness, silence equals death.
Right.
It's
Right.
true, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so true. And
Yeah.
if you're not allowed to speak certain things, then it's really very dangerous. I
And
think.
especially given that we're in a time where media and you know, mainstream journalism, who has always been assigned that task
Right.
of presenting all that stuff, they've shirked that responsibility.
Right, totally. Or not been in the middle and
Exactly.
just honestly
You know,
written
so
about
it's like-
things. Or
So where are you going to
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
kind of discourse?
Where?
Well, you get it from comics. You know, you really are. It's the only place. You know, and there's another interesting thing about younger comedians. It's sort of, you know, there are movements within the art form of comedy, the same way there are movements in music or movements in painting, whatever. And the overriding movement in younger generation of comedy right now is ironic detachment. If you go and see as much comedy as you can over the period of a month, I would bet you'd hit about 75 to 80% of it is ironically detached. And by that I mean you see so many comedians who sort of, you know, everything's with a wink or a nudge, you know, there's something arch about it, or they embody a certain character, or in many ways it almost feels like they're apologizing for being in the form of stand-up, which is just not hip enough for them, you know. And there's some great work being done that's ironically detached. That this is not a value judgment, it's just an observation. But as a result, it's not the common denominator to find a comedian who's really speaking from the heart.
that's really too bad.
You know, there's a lot of comedy out there right now that's really arch and ironically detached. You know, look at the Sarah Silverman show, Dimitri Martin. They're all fantastic shows. The Flight of the Conchords. They're all fantastically funny shows and great performers. But as a movement, it's a little disconcerting because I'm really looking for people to speak from their heart.
Yeah,
You know?
well,
And there are some young comics in Satiristias who are doing that. Lee Camp, Jamie Kilstein, who's just a phenom. I think he might actually be a big part of turning that around. But I just think that's interesting, and it says something, although I can't exactly zero in on what, about culture right now.
right. Well, you know, way back when Lenny Bruce was doing that and nobody else was doing it, and that was before even the 60s really whipped in. I mean, I think art forms, you know, whichever one it kind of hits, you know, there are different art forms at different times that are almost like they know the Gestalt before it's the Gestalt, and they know the collective unconscious. It's like almost like a foreshadowing. This is what's going to start to happen.
Well, that's a
soon,
really
it's start to
well,
happen
that's a
soon,
really
and-
interesting point.